Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow podcast. And on today's episode, Randal Kolo Muani is on his way out of Paris Saint-Germain, but which Premier League club would best suit the Frenchman? There's drama between the sporting director and the manager at West Ham, but who will come out on top? And then we take a look at two interesting players mooted as Arsenal reinforcements this January. That's all on today's episode. So we are back for another Wednesday edition, our first Wednesday edition of the year. I'm here with Ravi. How are you doing, Ravi?
I'm doing great, Patrick. How are you? How was your vacation or holiday period?
It was good. It was good. I'm rejuvenated. I'm refreshed. I'm not really, but you know, it's a new year, so we can lie to ourselves for like another month. How was your break? You're now wearing about 3 times as many layers as the last time.
It's yeah, it is very sunny out, but it's 10 degrees below freezing in Fahrenheit, so it's probably -5 centigrade or something. It's very windy here, like a lot of wind gusts and stuff, and so it's been cold. Like you don't want to turn up the heat in the house to like 25 centigrade. So you don't want the house to be that hot. So you keep it low. Mm-hmm. And so then you just wear more layers.
But look, for those viewers who don't know, Ravi is a hardcore runner and was out running in, like Arctic conditions, right? Yesterday, or was that
yesterday
morning?
And today, both days. Yeah, it's like it was like real feel of -13 centigrade. Or 8 Fahrenheit, something like that. Yeah, the thing with running is that if you wear like the right gear and then once you warm up, it really you don't feel that bad at all. And there's obviously I run with a group of people that are equally crazy, you could say. and so it actually is like a community thing. I think that's probably the most powerful thing. It just makes you forget a lot of the conditions.
Yeah, I get that. I can see how that would encourage you. To be honest, when it gets that cold, I hold my baby. My baby is roasting hot at all times, so you could just like kind of warm your hands on her. Okay. But we're gonna warm up the viewer today with some red hot transfer rumors. Because I would say that in the window so far, we're hearing less about legitimate interest in players than we're hearing players' agents trying to drum up some interest in their guys. And one of the guys who's been on the market most persistently is Randal Kolo Muani. He's been at PSG a while now, but has never really become a nailed-on starter. I think got just under 1,500 minutes last season after that 80 million euro move from Eintracht Frankfurt. And now he's apparently available for a permanent deal or maybe a loan to buy, and Premier League clubs are interested. Now, whether they actually are interested, I'm sure they're assessing him or not is kind of hard to say, but clearly PSG are willing to move on from him. They overpaid in the first place. What do you think of the player, Ravi? Because I want to talk a bit about the player and I want to talk also about fit for potential suitors.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking at his trajectory, and what PSG paid is insane, or was insane. I just can't believe like they paid off of just one real breakout season in Bundesliga. And before that, I think at Nantes, he had a couple of good seasons. I think what probably inflated his price was his call up to the national team and also his good performances with the French national team. And with French national team is a hard team to get into. It's almost like the fact that if you make it and you're a starter there at his age, I think that probably inflated his price a lot more. As a player, I see him. He's a very fast attacking player, great off the ball runner, someone that is stretching the line and that type of a forward. Great work rate off the ball, like pressing in out of possession, and also kind of chasing someone down like a winger or like a fullback down to win the ball back, like pressing from the front. I think these are some great qualities for him. And he's also pretty good at creating chances for other players. Like I think he can pass, he can cross. Well, I wouldn't say he can pass, but I think definitely crossing and combining and just I think with his pace and his movement, I think he can create situations where the next action he has to take is probably very straightforward and simple to put somebody in a good position to shoot.
Sure.
That I think he's good at that. Where it breaks down for me with him, or where it's kind of odd, is he doesn't score a lot. He doesn't take enough shots.
Yes.
And some of it could be that he's been shunted to the wide, and maybe some of that. But overall, even if you look at going back to Frankfurt time, he doesn't shoot as many as you would want a center forward to shoot. And so that's a big question. Like, if you're gonna look at him as someone to be your number 9 type player, he definitely has tools to play a certain type of 9. But the fact that he doesn't seem to get into too many shooting situations or take enough shots or score enough, I think that's going to be the biggest red flag for me with him.
Mm-hmm.
And like, my question, so the way I looked at this is like, well, what are my questions with him? If I'm a top 4 team, will he score enough to spend like 25 to 40 million dollars on him, or 40 million euros on him, and make him my starter? Like, is this the guy that's going to play 30 out of 38 matches for me? Well, I have a big question. That's a big question for me, and I'm mostly leaning towards a no on that. And he is at 26 years old now. And so whatever contract you give him, or whatever transfer fee you pay him right now, I don't think there is any upside in terms of resale, or you're not going to get it back. Like, if you give him a contract through 3+1 or a 4+1 through his age 30, I don't think you are. So this is a pure play of performance for now, that someone that is going to come in, play, and produce for you. So those are the two big questions for me. Like, how do I, so as a sporting director or as a team management, I want to know, okay, where do I stand with those two? And, what is my situation with other players in my team? And how do I see this team evolve in the next couple of windows or next couple of seasons? I think that's where I will position him.
Yeah, I think what you've said there, I think is interesting to pick up on, because we've had some pushback in some of the comments recently, where people said you're acting like a player is kind of finished at 26, 27. I think what you've clarified there is not that we're saying that, but at 26, 27, you are the player that you are. Like, you're quite unlikely to take a big step forward, and you're also not really going to have significant resale value at the end of a 4 or 5 year contract. And that's why we're talking about those players in a slightly different way to a guy who's maybe, 23 or something. Plus, of course, forwards do peak earlier, and he is quite explosive. Like, his acceleration is really impressive. That's great to watch. And that's, I think, one of the reasons that he looked so impressive coming on as a substitute quite often for France. But if you're playing him week in, week out, as he gets up to 28, 29, he is going to lose a little bit of that burst. And then you're going to be left with his skills. And his skills are like, okay. He's a decent passer. He was completing quite a lot of dribbles when he was at Frankfurt. Yes. But in order to complete 2 dribbles a game, he was attempting like over 5. So it was quite wasteful. And it was the same in France. And I look at those 2 leagues and I think these are not leagues where I love the defenders, where I'm bowled over by the one-on-one quality of the defenders. If you're a bit of a turnover machine in those leagues, I'm not sure that I can get much use out of you as a ball carrier in the Premier League. I guess there's a player you can dream on here, in that you can say he does get touches in the box. He gets a lot of touches in the box. And maybe you can park him there and he kind of blossoms as a striker. But at 26, he's not a kid that you're... It's not like when... Okay, there's an element of this where I was like... There was a version of this conversation going around when Chelsea signed Nick Jackson, where it was like, he's kind of played some wide minutes. He's kind of played through the middle. Like, is he going to be a reliable enough finisher who gets enough shots to be a centre forward? Like, we don't really know. But he was much, much younger. And this is more of a finished article player. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think Jackson, that's a good name you brought up, because that's one I've been thinking about. Like, well, how does he compare to Jackson? I wanted to ask you. To me, Jackson, because I watched him at Villarreal before coming coming to, even Villarreal B before coming to Chelsea, I think he was single-minded towards the goal.
Yes.
Like, I think he gets a ball, all he's thinking about is, I'm going to get into a shooting position to shoot and score. Like, I don't think that's Kolo Muani. I think Kolo Muani is more of a dribbler. Like, he wants to beat guys. And I think shooting is not, like, 90% of his decision is not, I'm going to go shoot. I think it's more, probably Jackson is more like, I'm the forward, give me the ball, I'm going to put the ball in the net. I think that's a different mindset and a different skill set.
No, I completely agree with that. Yeah. Like when a friend of mine said to me, he was surprised. He looked up the numbers and he said, you know that like 5/6 of Muani's career starts have been at centre forward. Supposedly, you never know how exact this stuff is. But when you watch him, you just would not think that at all, because he just gets attracted to the ball. He wants to be in the middle of the play. And so he's constantly dropping wide. And sometimes you get that. It's so he can, he then picks up speed and he makes a late run into the box. And that is valuable. But yeah, I agree. Like, I look at Kolo Muani and I kind of see him running horizontally along the pitch. And I look at Nick Jackson, I see him running diagonally towards the goal.
Diagonally, yeah. And the other thing is, like, Kolo Muani with the national team, you're talking about a front three with Mbappe and Griezmann or Giroud, like, or it's like, it's almost like there is so much defensively those guys attract from the opponent, like attention, that leaves Kolo Muani. Okay, they're like, okay, this guy, maybe he's not the prolific shooter as the other two. So, okay, we'll take our medicine with him, right? Sure. There's a little bit of that.
He's like Pedro on those great Barcelona teams where it's like, okay, if you can get this guy free, like, he's going to do damage, but he's not maybe as talented. Like, the gravity of the others is making him better.
Yeah, the gravity. Yeah, that's the right word. So where I see him in terms of, like, for a team, I won't name a team, but I see him as almost like a wide forward. Yeah. That for a team where he's not going to be the primary scorer, but combines well with the other front guys, either the number 9 and the other wide winger or forward. Probably the other guy, one of the other guys, is more a prolific finisher. Mm-hmm. So I think then Muani can, using his skills, can create situations where he can put the ball back to the number 9 in a really good shooting situation. I think that's how I see him. He might score 5 or 6 goals a season himself, but I will not sign him as, well, he's going to be my number 9 and he has to score 15 goals a season.
I completely agree with this. I was kind of like, this guy's not a winger and he's not a centre forward. He needs this hybrid position. And obviously he'd be fantastic for a slightly lower level team, because there his balance of attributes and his pace in the open field, like, really, really dangerous. I don't think that economically that's kind of possible. So I was thinking about the clubs that have been linked to him, and I don't think Arsenal makes sense at all to me. United, I don't really see it. Like, I'd go with Højlund. I'd persist with Højlund if I wanted this kind of guy, But Spurs, I think, is kind of interesting.
That was the first name it came to me. But then with Spurs, I think one of the things we talked about Spurs during their summer window is they have a lot of runners, but they don't have enough people that can create, right? To find these runners in good spots.
But now but in order to get around that, they've had to give up so much defensive solidity, right? So Ange kind of knows he's got guys who want to do that, and as a result, he's put Maddison and Kulusevski in there, and then the team just can't defend. Like, you've got all these guys who can. So you've got Brennan Johnson, who I guess is like, if you've got Brennan Johnson, you can argue then why do we need Kolo Muani? They're going to send Timo Werner back to Germany, so I don't know whether they want to replace him with. I don't know if it, kind of like for like he's not dissimilar to Werner. He's a bit more skillful in some ways, but I did think having the ability to maybe play a front two with Solanke and Muani sometimes would be interesting.
Yeah.
And with Kulusevski on the right wing, coming inside to create with his left foot, the idea of him playing balls into the box with Solanke and Muani, because Muani's big, he's nearly 6'2", I think. And then, you've got somebody like Papsar or Madison or Udogi or whoever it is, somebody else as well, crashing the box. Suddenly you think that's a really scary thing for defenses to have to face.
Yeah, I think just the power, pace, and acceleration coming from those guys, I think it would be with Solanke as the as the target. I agree with you. I think, as I said, the first name that came to me was Spurs when I saw him and his profile and watched him a little bit. Yeah, I totally agree. I think Spurs is a good shot.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see that. I mean, maybe there's another team who are, playing into space a little bit more and could get value out of him. But to me, most of those teams, we're generally talking about sides a little bit lower in the table. I would like to see that, but I don't really think it's going to happen. Okay, so maybe Spurs for Muani, but look, the money has got to be. PSG are going to take a huge haircut on this guy one way or another, and they've only got themselves to blame because it was crazy money. Okay, on the topic of poorly run clubs. Sorry. Should we talk about West Ham? Because West Ham, this isn't even the first story of this kind this season, but supposedly at West Ham, there is a rift between the sporting director, who's a guy called Tim Steidten, and the manager, Julen Lopetegui, who is not out of a job. But I mean, I feel for him because we're kind of at this stage where the press are reporting things like West Ham are considering whether to sack him, and you think, like, you just sack him at that point. Like, nobody comes back from that, really.
Yeah. Yeah, and then like the other thing about like they're talking to Graham Potter, and surely some people or like agents are leaking some information about discussions and stuff, and it's totally unfair to, no matter what kind of a job he's done at a personal, professional level, for somebody that's in that job and not officially out of it, it's pretty unfair how this has been going on.
Yeah, and I mean, look, from the point of view of his team, it's not unreasonable to be talking about it. Like there's a 6-point gap between them and Everton, Wolves, those kind of teams. That to me, they're not far off that level. They are kind of that level. But anyway, the issue now is that supposedly Lopetegui has said that Steidten is not allowed to come to the training ground, which actually I think David Moyes said about the same guy, right? Once he was like, doesn't come
spring.
In my dressing room.
Yeah,
twice in under a year.
So this is what makes me like so concerned. I like just think about how dysfunctional this has to be. So if you consider football club as a company or as an organization, right? The two foremost executives that are dealing with the two most important departments, recruiting players and running the first team. Like these are the two things that the entire fortune of the club depends on. The two people running them, they need to work very close to each other, have to have a level of trust. Even though their goals may be different, they don't always match, because one of them is more longer term, forward looking, other one is more next week, next game mentality. But the fact that them two cannot see each other's face in a building, in their office, I can't imagine how bad the whole environment is going to look like, is there, right? Like if you look at the timeline, Steidten, he came in last year, I think 23, I guess, like summer of 23. He hired Lopetegui summer of 24. And Lopetegui came in with a huge staff. That was big news at the time too, like 7 or 8 people. And there were some, and we analyzed their transfers, and they had some questionable transfers. And I think the overall grade we gave was a C across all of us. And the collective sigh we had was, we don't get it. Like that's literally, I went back and looked up our analysis, and they signed Nicolas Füllkrug to a 4-year deal, and we're like, that just makes no sense in this day and age. And so like things were off to a bad start there. So I don't know how much of input that Lopetegui had on all those signings. Obviously, they started very poorly at the start of the season. They lost a lot of matches, and there was a crisis situation of firing the manager early on too. But I think he won a few games, and then they kind of averted that situation and kept going forward. Yeah, it just, to me, it feels like it's must be a very difficult environment to work there right now for everyone, not just these two guys, but for everybody in the staff. It must be very difficult.
Is this kind of stuff inevitable when you've got managers who are kind of performing poorly and are maybe going to lose their jobs? As in like a rift, not maybe the public element of it, but this rift between them and the sporting director? Or does this reflect badly on Steidten at this point, given that this is the second time in under a year?
I think that I can understand that there will be some level of just separation, which I think is, normal. I wouldn't say like they're all kind of like lovey-dovey all the time. I think that it's not. It's like these are like they're making really hard decisions, and I think that it comes with the territory. So, but I think that this situation seems like very extreme and not that normal. And the fact is that you have to, if you are the technical director, you have to be rooting for your coach. That's because you hired him. I mean, at the end of the day, like that's your hire, and you want him to succeed and so like obviously I don't know where things broke down to a point where that they don't want to see each other in the building. And there's also the other thing I noticed, that there's also a sporting director, Mark Noble, the former player. I don't know what his role is, maybe just ceremonial, but it feels like, like he would have something to say in this, or usually that personality could be the conduit between the two. Like generally that probably happens at a lot more clubs, is that there is one person where the two big heads kind of trust, and that's the one that kind of connecting them, like the connective tissue between the two. But I hope Mark Noble is that kind of person, or that role. But obviously we haven't seen anything about him or him saying anything about this. It is definitely an uncommon situation.
Okay. Can you really see any way out of it for the manager? I mean, it just kind of feels like he's going to lose his job unless results suddenly magically, pick up this month.
Well, I think he lost a couple of games, but then he lost to Liverpool and City. Like on paper, losing to those two. Okay, City has been struggling, but still it is Man City. Like you knew that there would come a game where they'll turn it around to some degree.
And West Ham weren't even that bad in the game, to go away to City. I thought they were pretty. It was actually a kind of creditable performance.
Yeah, exactly. So if so it just seems like, and then all the news around that Graham Potter is interviewing or interviewed or agreed, like all these different levels of speculation on that, all that seem to point to that I think his job is, I think he's going to be relieved of his duties pretty soon. But I think this whole thing playing out in public is pretty unsavory for everyone involved, and it does reflect very poorly on the club.
Yeah, and I mean West Ham have had a bunch of problems like this for some time. It feels like that club just needs a kind of root and branch rebuild, but I also don't think.
I think David Moyes basically kept it together. I think for the last few years, and
in that sense, maybe that was the underrated part of that appointment, which is that we kind of always talked about the actual output of the teams, but obviously Moyes as well does have that history as a guy who runs the club. That's what he did at Everton, so maybe that helped keep West Ham afloat for a while.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Well, shall we then go on to our last segment here, because we've got a couple of players who are linked with Arsenal, and I think they're actually interesting players to talk about for any team. Now, look, obviously Arsenal fans don't deserve good things. So I mean, no fans do really, but especially not Arsenal fans. But obviously the situation, they had that loss last night against Newcastle, which actually they were a lot better in attack in that game than they have been in a lot of their previous games. But they've got Bukayo Saka missing for a while. There are already question marks around the attack. Rumours that they want a reinforcement. They did go into the season probably a forward light. So the two names here, we've got Mikkel Damsgaard of Brentford, and we've got Lee Kang-in of PSG. Who do you want to talk about first? Because I'm interested in both these guys.
Yeah, we can start with Lee Kang-in.
Yeah, sure.
I watched him a bit and also just looked at his trajectory. He broke out at Mallorca. I mean, he's only like 23, turning 24 now. So he broke out at Mallorca barely when he was 20. He was under 20 when he played for Valencia, and then quickly moved from Valencia to Mallorca. And then he had a breakout season, 22-23 at Mallorca, at which point he moved to PSG after that season. One thing that kind of just jumps out for him is that he's so versatile.
Yeah.
I mean, he has played, I would say, not significant, but not insignificant minutes, at least 5 or 6 different positions. It's just, someone that's a good football player that can kind of adapt and shows probably like his IQ in terms of understanding the role and the responsibilities given in a game, and he would go and implement it. That speaks very highly of him. So if you look at his data, like at Mallorca, he was literally the best player on the team, and so he was on the ball a lot of dribbles, a lot of carries. But when he moved to PSG, his role changed. I think he was a lot more working off the ball in 24. At least this past season, you will know that PSG has a severe issue of scoring goals this year. And so he actually has started playing more a role of scorer. I think he scored like 6 goals for them this season.
Yeah.
In the league.
And he started up front quite a bit, right?
Yeah, it started up front quite a bit. And so you see a player that can adapt to all these different types of roles. And also he's now playing as a forward. Now you have responsibilities like off the ball out of possession, like pressing and engaging attackers, engaging the opponents to slow their attacks down. And he's done a lot of that this season to show what he can do if you put him in that role and ask him to do something. So like, here is a player that is highly competent, or that has shown that he's highly competent at age 23, fulfilling a variety of roles. And I think that's a plus. Now, though, obviously the questions with him is, what is his best position? And a corollary to it doesn't even matter, right? Like, he's someone that you plug him in, he's going to play. But the real question to answer here is, if you figure out that in my team, he's going to play this role, is he elite in that role? Like, let's say, is there something that he's elite in? That's the question that's the more important and interesting question for teams to answer before going forward with him.
And I think that this is where it becomes difficult, because I love this player. I really love him. I think, his positional versatility suggests that he's intelligent, but also the fact, he's got really high dribble success. He has a very high pass accuracy while playing lots of difficult passes, progressive passes, balls into the box, and creating chances. And to me, all that stuff suggests this is a guy who knows what to do in a given moment. Like, that is really, really exciting. And 8 goal involvements this season, about 900 league minutes. Okay, it's in France, but
PSG hasn't been scoring, so
yeah, you can't knock that at all. And he's kind of gone over 2 shots this season as well. So if you looked at him as just a kind of like raw, as a guy who could like back up Uruguay and Saka, you'd be so lucky to have this guy. Shots, chances created, dribbles. He does the deeper work as well. He works pretty hard as a defender. But the opportunity cost, I guess, is the question here. You know, like if you go and spend whatever it's going to be, you know, 40 million to get this guy permanently, is it going to stop you going and getting somebody in the summer who is truly outstanding in that left midfield role, in that left wing role, up front? Like that's the thing, because I think this is a player any team would like to have. But if Arsenal would buy him and then they'd say, well, you kind of like Kai Havertz, you know, it's like, well, you'll get some striker minutes and you'll get some attacking mid minutes and you'll get some right wing minutes. I don't really know what they're doing here, because in the long run, I don't know if I don't think he's going to take that role from Saka. Maybe he could take Odegaard's role, but I doubt it. So I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the question for me also with him is if I'm going to pay that kind of money, he has to be starting for my team, and what position will he start, and will that impede us from getting a better player in a different position or in the same position, like 40 million and 60 million, like you may get a different level player. Now in those price ranges, one of the issues is also availability. Like there are not that many players available that you would say, well, this guy's clearly better than Lee Kang-in, and and he's worth 60. Like it's not that you wait and you get it, and I have 60 million spent for this position. You can get a better player than him. So there is that also to balance out here. Like I do look at it now. Like now Arsenal playing a lot of Leandro Trossard so I would immediately like switch them out, right? Like if I have Lee Kang-in, like just put him on the field, right? Just something like that. I think it'll be like an instant improvement. But again, you have to think about the long term also, not just the next 6 months.
Yeah, if Arsenal can do this without it radically changing their summer plans, then I think they should absolutely do it immediately. That would be great. Or if they can obviously get a loan, if they could get a loan with an option, like great. I think Arsenal are gonna want probably a difference-making, like world-class attacker. I think that seems to be what they're talking about. Or they're just going to want the guy that Arteta wants, who I think is Nico Williams. Like they want Nico Williams, right? Like Arteta.
Yeah, so Nico Williams is your 80 million, 70 million, whatever number. That's very big, right? This is something that like that. And I think Barcelona will go after him again in the summer, I think. So so now you have to weigh your chances of what that looks like with Nico Williams. But yes, he is Nico Williams in that left wing or left forward, left-sided role, attacking role is much better than I think Lee Kang-in. I think that's one player that I would put him above him.
Sure, but it's right now. I mean, like this is probably the best player out there, or at least one of the best names that I've heard. Like I think this is a player. We're going to talk about Damsgaard. I like Damsgaard. I think he's interesting, but guys like Muani or Jokeres or all these names on the market, Lee is more impressive, I think, than most of those guys. And there's considerable possibility that there's more here even than we're seeing, because he was so exciting as a young player and because he's been shunted around at PSG.
Yeah, and think about it, like someone that has shown that he can do a bunch of different things at a very high level shows like how he knows what to do in every moment of the game, and he's only 23, and a coach like Arteta might see that as like, well, give me that. I'm going to mold him into, like I have a guy that I can basically throw anything at him and he will understand. Like day one, he comes into training and he's already ready. So there is a little bit of that too. Like it's not a player that has one primary skill, one or two primary skills, and he's just try to solve every problem with those. Whereas Lee Kang-in seems to be, give me the problem, I'll solve the way it needs to be solved type player.
Yeah. So I think it's he would make Arsenal much more robust or much more anti-fragile, I guess. That would be a real benefit of him. Whether he'd be a kind of difference maker, like a nailed-on starter who would change the fortunes of that club go forward, that's like your mileage might vary on that. I would really like to see him playing regular football in a consistent position, which I think, to me, I want to see him in that inside right half space where his incredible dribbling ability, because the fact that his dribble success his whole career has been kind of astonishing. You know, this is a guy completing like 2/3 of his dribbles as a teenager in La Liga, which is insane to me. I want to see that, and I do think he's got a pretty amazing eye for a pass. So there's a great player there. If Arsenal signed him, I as an Arsenal fan, I'd be delighted, and as a football fan, I'd be very, very keen to see what he could be. But
yeah, as a football fan, like with Arteta, like kind of getting them two together, we can kind of probably speculate like this could probably take him to another level in terms of, like, you know how when players go to Pep, their level of understanding of football, at least the younger players, tend to they're a different player after a year or two with Pep. I think that's probably similar with Arteta for someone like Kang-in Lee. So I think that's something that I would be interested to see.
Yeah. Arteta would probably love him. You can see what he'd like about him. He's hardworking. He's clearly intelligent. He speaks Spanish, which I think Arteta genuinely does love. Okay, well, shall we move on from him? Because there's another guy who's a different kind of profile, which is Mikkel Damsgaard. So he joined Brentford a couple of seasons ago, and it was considered a bit of a coup when they got him off Sampdoria, because he impressed at Euro 2020, the delayed Euro 2020 in 2021. He had another season in Italy. Then he went to Brentford. The fee, I think, was 15, 20. Like, it was a very reasonable price. Yeah, and he was 22, and now he's 24. And after not playing much the last two seasons, 1,800 minutes over the last two seasons combined, and 2 goal involvements, now he's suddenly the 4th most used outfielder in Brentford squad, and looks fantastic. I mean, what's your impression of the player, Ravi?
I think he's a lot more like a passer, like a progressive passer. Like, he has an eye for a pass, that breaking lines, and someone that can find a runner. I think when he gets the ball, he's looking vertical, and he's looking to find the right, like the furthest pass. I think that's what I see when I watch him. In the little bit I watch, seems really good at creating chances, and out of possession does a lot of good work. And he's relatively strong in the air for his position, for what he is. And I think he's an all-around very good player. And obviously, the difference between him and Lee Kang-in is that he's done this in the Premier League for a mid-table team. So you take him and put him in a top 4 team. So you've already seen what he can do in this league. And so I think there is that a little less risk of him being less or disappointing from what they expect of him. So there is that going for him.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy though, because like he's obviously, what combines these guys is they're creative, but Damsgaard he does make sense as a kind of Odegaard backup, right? You know, he's mostly played in the midfield 3. He's played a bit behind a striker. He's not going to really cover you in the wide positions. But he's put up very good expected assist numbers in particular, rather. And he does a lot of that deeper progression play that Odegaard does. So, you know, he's at 5 final third entries and 7 progressive passes this season. And, you know, if you just swapped out, if Odegaard got injured and you just put in a more conventional 10 who just does 10 stuff, though there aren't that many of those, you're, I think, going to struggle without all the ball progression and the really driving the game on that Odegaard gives you. That there is that interesting thing there about the stylistic difference. So what you were saying there, he's looking for killer passes so much of the time, and he's got low pass completion as a result, and his expected assists are very, very high, but off relatively few chances created. So it's kind of like he's creating few shots, but really high value one. And how replicable that is at a team who plays sitting defenses, who, I mean, look. On the other hand, you know, Arsenal don't run counterattacks very well quite often. You know, you look at the Newcastle game last night. There are a few opportunities they had to counter, and the pass is just behind, or someone is a bit too risk averse with the pass that they need to play. And maybe their Damsgaard gives you goals that you wouldn't get otherwise. But maybe he comes in and Arteta makes him more risk averse, and you're playing deep blocks and he just can't create.
Yeah, that's what I'm probably like lean towards more. It's an Arsenal thing, like with Arteta, that how they overall philosophy of their passing. But I think as a player, like he's not as versatile as Lee Kang-in. If you're going to compare these two as one of them, if you want to pick one of them for the team, but he's more a central player to me. He's not a wide player at all. Like I think you can nominally play him as inverted from the left side, but he will be playing in the 10 space. And then, he will drop to help kind of progress the ball, but I think he'll operate more in the central spaces.
Mm-hmm. You can imagine him in that left midfield role, so then you've got quite an interesting balance, right? Because if you have him out there with Martinelli, you do have creation from that left-hand side.
Yeah.
And then you've got 2 left-footers on the right and 2 right-footers on the left and somebody through the middle and presumably Rice mopping up behind them. And I do think he'd be very useful in the counter press. He, like you were saying, his defensive output is really, really good. He works super, super hard. And again, like looking at this guy, I was kind of like, if you don't have this player, I think it's quite hard to go out and justify big expenditure on him. But having a sort of multi-talented try-hard in your team is great. Like, he's a great player to have. I'm not sure that I would go and spend on him, given other issues that Arsenal have. He does dribble a little bit as well, which would be interesting, because Arsenal are kind of not very dribbly this season. I wanted to ask you about that. You look at the shots created off take-ons this season, and you've got Liverpool and Man City at the top, and then you've got Brighton, Chelsea, Spurs, and Arsenal are down in 8th. They're below Wolves, they're below West Ham. Now, do you think this is a problem you can solve by just putting like the interest in Nico Williams? I think is a weird part of this, because Nico Williams' primary skill set is that he's a dribbler, I think.
Yeah.
But the fact that Arsenal are so low suggests, kind of like we were saying, that Arteta doesn't want Arsenal doing that. He wants them creating with passing, not with dribbling. So I don't know what's going on here.
Well, I think with Nico Williams, like if you would think that the plan for Nico Williams is that, well, here is a guy who's elite at doing this, dribbling, or one of the elite players doing that and creating chances off of the dribble. So I think that's where I think you have to, as Arsenal, Arteta's game model or the plan has to give a little to accommodate that. Otherwise, there is no point getting a Ferrari to drive on a, just a rugged terrain, right? Like, it's not going to work. So, but he may not be willing to do that for lesser players. And I think that's fair. Like, if you're going to give me an average or above average dribbler, I'm not going to change. Like, I can't depend on this. He's not elite in this. So I can't. I think my plan is better than him trying to do this, and we depend on this for success. So I think there is that. With respect to Arsenal not creating as much of the dribble, I think yesterday during the game I mentioned something that at times Arsenal offense reminds me of like a term in basketball called half court offense, which is basically they walk up to middle of the court. Basically, there's no defense or nominal. They walk the ball up there, and then they start trying to move the defenders in a way that then they can get an open shot, like in 24 seconds. Like that's kind of half-court offenses, I think, in basketball. Arsenal this year has given me a lot of that, where they try to control a lot of the flow of the game. Like, basically, they're so keyed in on not conceding anything. I mean, literally anything at all, meant that they also sacrifice a lot of that element of surprise. Like you're not doing a lot of the bait and then do switch where you then get into really good situations where you can have a one-on-one situation. But the fact that if you're baiting one or a few times, you're going to fail with the bait. So they don't want that. And I think that's probably one of the reasons. And, and I think teams also, what it means is that when Saka has the ball, teams double team him or even triple sometimes. And and that means that he can't really do much with dribbling.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I just read a piece by Billy Carpenter, who people can check out. And he was talking about the differences between Arsenal and Liverpool, you know, and whether there's stuff that Arsenal can learn from Liverpool. And he was surprised to learn that Liverpool's speed towards goal this season is actually slower than Arsenal's. But that's also kind of Liverpool playing more forward passes and backward passes. And when things aren't working out, they go backward and then they wait for space to open up. And that's one of the reasons that it feels like Liverpool are always running into space. They move people around until they do that. Arsenal go up to the high on the flank and they pin you in there with, you know, Timber and Saka and Odegaard, and all those guys combine and they hope they can create something. And the advantage of that is that, you know, Odegaard and Saka are pretty special and sometimes they do create something, but also it means that it's much harder for the team defending to bust out with a counter-attack, right? Because they're wingers and they're central midfielders. Everybody's back defending in this zone. They're really pinned back. So it's all, like you say, it's all designed to be as robust as possible and to help the rest defense. And the problem with it is that there's so rarely any space at all. And if you're not willing to commit people forward, then there's no one to cross to in the box, bar like one guy. And of course, as kind of happened against Newcastle last night, sometimes the team just has one or two really, really multi-skilled players who are really good at playing counter-attacking football, and they're able to create one or two chances off it, and you lose. So it does. I do think that, you know, trying to diversify the creative profile of the team. I think Nico Williams would be great from the point of view of he would help control Arteta's poor instincts or poor instincts. His more conservative instincts. Like Arteta would kind of have to let him do what he does. I think that would help Arsenal.
Yeah, so they call, I mean, I don't like to use these other sport references, but in NFL, they call it opening the playbook.
Okay.
Where if you have the right quarterback that can, like, normally what happens is, well, this quarterback, he's only a game manager. He can do like a lot of dink and dunk, like smaller pass, like shorter passes, but he's very high on the accuracy. So he can complete 70% of his passes, but he's only going to throw like 12 yards, 15 yards, 10 yards, 8 yards, like that. But when they do get someone that has a bigger or a stronger arm that is more accurate, throwing 25, 30 yards, they say, well, the coach is going to open the playbook for him where he's going to call in those plays, where he's going to, the longer plays. I think with the analogy here is that with Nico Williams, who's elite at dribbling and creating chances off of dribble, I think that could be what Arteta would do at that point, is like, well, now I have to clear space for him so that he can do that. And you have to then move things around in terms of how you set up everybody else so that he can get into those spots. Like it's almost like how you with Mbappe, you want to create the diagonal run from the left to right into the box with him, right? Like that's what you want to create 5-6 times a game or 10 times a game with him. And so you have to then just move everybody around and just do all that work, like in preseason and in training. So hopefully, I think it's probably something like that.
That's really interesting, because in that sense, it feels like when we're talking about players and like, would they be good fits for Arteta's team, you kind of wonder if that's actually the best thing, and whether what they really need is a more diversified attacking profile. You know, obviously it's easy to say, well, what if they had a superstar, you know, really elite left winger? But you almost wonder what they would be like with a guy who maybe has his weak spots, but is primarily a ball carrier and dribbler. Like if they had Doku, I wonder what that would do for Arsenal's attack, or whether he'd just become a really safe passer on the left wing. I don't know.
Or maybe he never gets off the bench.
Yeah, I mean, that's also a possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is all fascinating. This is all the stuff where I think when you are building a team, you want to build where like you can't go too far doing one thing or just having one philosophy. I think you want to be a little diverse in terms of, and this is where the constant push and pull between, or tug and pull between the sporting director and the coach happens, is that coach has like very clear ideas how they want to play, but then the opponent's coaches and analysts also have a clear idea of how you want to play. So then how do you beat that? Like, one is to have better players, but that is not always possible. And sometimes even if you have better players, you may not be able to break the variance battle. Like you score a goal and then you just can't score a second, and you give up on a just a freak play. And so just one more point on this. Like I think we mentioned him before. The owner of CD Castellon, he's Bob Voulgaris. He made a lot of money gambling on. His story is all online. You can read it on ESPN. Like, he made a ton of money gambling the edge on NBA basketball games, and then now he's bought Castellon and he's trying to run the team. He doesn't have any scouts, and he has a sporting director, but Bob calls all the decisions. Primarily, like, he makes all the decisions, and they're all based on analytics and also a lot on betting analytics. Like, it's not just the recruitment analytics that we talk about. He also looks at like betting analytics. So one of the things that he mentions in one of his interviews is, soccer is a low scoring game. So I want my games to be high scoring because I think I have better players against most of the teams. And, if I have better players and if the games are high scoring, then I can't be beaten by variance too often. And that's a completely different, like, I think diametrically opposite philosophy to saying we're going to give as few XG as possible. We're going to concede as few XG as possible. We have better players and we can score 1 goal or 2 goals. Like, it's just a completely different philosophy to play. And if you watch Castellon, they do play like that. They attack with just high octane attack. Obviously they got through the 3rd division in Spain and got promoted last year, but I think they are kind of, I think, recalibrating themselves with their style, with how to do that in Segunda. I think they started off pretty well. They had a lean patch towards the end of the first half. We'll see how they come out in the second half. But it's a fun team to follow. And that's a different philosophy to what we discussed about Arteta and Arsenal, how they're doing things this year.
Yeah, they're both they're both taking the angle that, like, what we're really scared of is variance, but coming to completely different conclusions about how to engage in it. I don't know, maybe we're heading towards this, given that Arsenal and Manchester City are such intense control teams, and in the Premier League now, there are so many good attackers so far down the league that the chances of you completely locking down a Premier League side are kind of slim, and it maybe does make more sense to open the game up a little bit more, like Liverpool this season, who are a good defensive team, but not a great defensive team. And just know that, like, okay, well, if there's more space for your attackers, there's more space for our attackers, and our attackers are incredible.
Better than yours. Yeah. And so, like, Liverpool is, I think if we go back and see Liverpool's games, they're good for 2 to 3 goals every game.
Yeah.
And I think that's football, like, global average teams score about 2.7, 2.8 goals per game. So if you can't score 2 goals per game, it's hard to win a lot of games because it's just math.
Yeah. What a note to end this on. Thank you, Ravi. That was really, really interesting. And I think that, look, I said this to Ted, and Ted kind of shot me down, but I do think it's shaping up to be quite an interesting month. There are lots of names on the market who I find intriguing, and I would say that, broadly speaking, over the last 5 to 10 years, the players on the market we don't love are significantly better than the players on the market we didn't love 10 years ago, when there were guys who I was like, I just never sign this guy. Now I think, no, if there's the right fit, like, pretty much any of these people could be super, super useful to the right team. So thank you very much. And thank you to you at home for listening or watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do like and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on a podcast app, then leave us a 5-star review. Let us know which transfers you'd like us to cover. You can get at us on Twitter, Blue Sky, or in the comments below. And we will catch you next Monday, by which, who knows? By which time, who knows what will have happened in football. Thank you very much. We'll see you later.